Hello, welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a guest, special guest, Liz Fernandez. Thank you, Liz, for coming on the show.
Jerome, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to join you and the audience to share and have a conversation today.
Thank you, my pleasure. I like to start with a quick game, right? This game is called Start, Bench, or Cut. So I give you three topics, and you have to start one, bench one, and cut one. So you start the best, you bench the second best, and you cut the third best based on your opinion. So I want you to think about your experience in school, your student experience yourself. Which one would you start, bench, or cut? Your elementary school experience, your middle school experience, or your high school experience, and why?
Love the question. I would probably start my elementary school experience. I would bench my middle school experience and I would cut my high school experience. And truthfully, Jerome, because we have a limited number of players on the field or on the court, I would say to you that in any given moment, I would probably change that answer. I was really fortunate to have amazing educators and have phenomenal learning experiences throughout. I'm a Head Start kid, so starting in Head Start through my senior year of high school, really amazing experiences. I just want to give a big shout out and I think really honor and center elementary school teachers at this moment in particular, and just, be really honest about the extraordinary teachers that I had in elementary school that really changed my life and gave me a sense of joy in learning and purpose that I am hopeful continues for the young people who are in school at the moment and moving forward.
I love that. So what was it about high school that made you bench it this time?
It's really interesting that high school for me, I went to school for 3 years in Dominican Republic, in Santo Domingo, which is where I'm from. My family relocated. So I did 7th grade and 9th, 10th, and 11th grade in Dominican Republic, and loved it. It was great. Some of my best friends, I'm still in contact with some of the teachers that I was blessed to have in my life, 30 plus years ago. So that, that tells you something. Transitioning from a junior year in high school in Dominican Republic at an international independent day school, and then moving to New York City without your parents, moving in with your brother. I moved in with my brother and his partner and ended up going to school my senior year at an all-girls, very small Catholic independent school. It was hard. I mean, when people think about their senior year, they're thinking about very different things that I ended up having to think about. I worked 35 hours a week to be able to pay the tuition because my family couldn't afford the transitions and all of the extras that come in a senior year, like college applications and all of that. And so it's not that it was terrible. It wasn't at all. I mean, I had an amazing experience all 4 years of high school. They were just 4 very different years, in particular, the transition from one country to another. So I would cut it only because I'm really giving big ups to the elementary school teachers. I really wouldn't cut any part of my educational experience. I wouldn't bench any of it either. I really, really loved school, and I still love school, which is why I think I ended up being an educator.
So something that stood out to me for you and your journey was one, and I think these are 2 factors that play a role, and not enough, in my opinion, of not enough Black and brown educators in the field of education, is you said you had a great experience in school and you love your teachers, and that played a role in you becoming a teacher. And I feel like a lot of times with our Black and brown students, their experience, some of them may have negative experiences in these classrooms and the school buildings, and that prevents them from ever wanting to become a teacher because their experiences in the field or with teachers weren't as positive as they could have been. And also, those standardized tests, right? If, as a student, if you don't do well on standardized tests, even as an adult, if you're not good at taking standardized tests, sometimes you can't become certified to become a teacher. I know so many people who tried to become a teacher and failed the teacher exams 5 or 6 times and given up because those tests there's bias built into those tests a lot of times, and it holds us back from getting into different fields, not only for you, the field of law, but also the field of education as well. And I think, and often those tests are so far removed from what you actually do when you become, when you get into that career. So it's so much that has to be changed in that area to get more Black and brown educators into the field. What do you think is the biggest thing that holds a lot of Black and brown teachers from, joining the field in your experience?
Yes to everything you just said on every level. I remember thinking about this. I'll start with my own experience. I mentioned I'm a Head Start kid. I mentioned, I'm a very proud alum. I served on the board of Bloomingdale Family Head Start, and getting an incredible foundation. And then I went to PS 75 on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, an amazing school in the 70s. Really, wonderful. I cannot tell you that I had a whole lot of teachers of color. So I think that's contributing to, if you don't see yourself reflected in the leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm not talking about school leaders. I'm not talking about the administrators. I'm talking about those and classroom teachers on a daily level. Yes. I would love for our young people, today to understand and appreciate that there are leaders everywhere. In some cases, some of our schools have the most extraordinary numbers of people of color working in facilities, in campus safety, and in the dining staff. And those are, for me, the most extraordinary role models. So I think part of it is just a shift change in how we see one another. The people who care for me, people who make sure, we're safe, people make sure that we can walk in and through a school community and for it to be clean and welcoming. And the people who make sure that we get the appointments, have the copies that we need, get the follow-up necessary in the administrative staff personnel. And lastly, the people who make sure that we're nourished, they make their food with such love for all of us. Those are the people for me that I remember in elementary school and that I remembered throughout some of the years that I was in school where I didn't have teachers who had a similar experience. I mean, yes, they might have looked like me because, for all intents and purposes, people read me as a white woman. And that's only part of my story. If you know the history of the Latinx identity, you'll know that it's 1/3 European, 1/3 African, and 1/3 indigenous from the islands. And in our communities, like so many communities, you're going to get a range of people in the same family. And that is normal. And what we've seen has been a very clear stereotype of one kind of person, or one kind of story. And that's really limiting too. So, to go back to your question of why people don't consider, why more people don't enter into education. For some of us, our families did not value education. I'm the daughter of immigrants. I heard very clearly, there are things you cannot do, you cannot be, because in their home countries, education wasn't valued. By the way, when I told my mother that I wanted to go into law enforcement, that wasn't valued either. That wasn't something, there were a few choices: doctor, lawyer, accountant, business owner, professional. That's when technology started. So maybe technology, architecture, dentist, veterinarian. Those were sort of the big professions that I think my parents in particular wanted me to pursue.
Mm.
They didn't understand liberal arts education. As far as they're concerned, you go to, I mean, in high school in Dominican Republic, back when they were students, and your senior year of high school had you on a trajectory. If you were going to be a lawyer, you took a certain set of classes. If you were going to go into medicine, you took a certain set of classes. So you really were declaring early on in high school what you were going to do. I think people of color not understanding the range of schools that exist and the roles that exist in a school, I think is important. Public schools require a very clear set of certifications, and there's good reason for those certifications. I'm not calling them into question. If you have those certifications and you know that the educational system is biased against people of color in particular, and you also know that standardized testing, including certification testing, is not designed for unilateral success across all social identifiers.
Yeah.
That's an example of systemic racism right there.
That's my point.
You know, so just keep it the way that it is. And then compounded with, many of us come from families that didn't value education, like, you know, as a profession. They valued teachers, the teachers who taught us, but they didn't value the sacrifices they made for our generation to become educators in the same way. And I think that's part of it. I also, you know, just want to recognize that one of the things that's most exciting for me is to consistently break stereotypes, to consistently break what you see, and then the story that you get in your head about who someone might be. And it's often resorting to useless stereotypes that are also a form of creating systematic expectations and self-fulfilling prophecies. You know, when I see a young person of any skin color, racial identity, ethnic identity, when I hear someone speaking in whatever language it might be or with an accent, when I see how someone's dressed, and I think I might get clues about their socioeconomic status, when I look at someone and I think I might identify what gender they might be expressing at the moment, when I think about who someone might love or be attracted to in terms of their sexual orientation, when I think about where someone might be worshiping, you know, as their faith or spiritual practice, if they even are, when I think about someone's age, when I think about someone's intellectual, cognitive, and mental health abilities, I mean, I just did, you know, the social identities. I can come up with a million different stories and probably will fail miserably, because dedication, love, and passion in a field like ours isn't about who all of those things are. It might be, and it might inform. It's also about what you bring. And if you, for some of us, we've heard consistently, you won't amount to much. You know, mass incarceration sends a very clear message. Those of us that are English language learners heard very clearly, you know, you're not going to be particularly successful. When we talk about immigration, I mean, that was 30 plus years ago that I was having these conversations. It's 2021. Still. It's the same ones.
Same thing.
And so, you know, I am somebody who, when I hear you can't do something, for some, they hear that and they sadly believe it. And too many of our young people, too many of our incredibly dedicated and passionate educators who want to be in the classroom hear that, or they believe it because they haven't done well on a test, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I love that. Yeah.
I challenge us to think about somebody saying to you, you can't do this, because my attitude from a very young age, much to the dismay of my mother, was, wait, did you just say I can't do something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Stand back and watch me.
I love that. That's such a great, mentality to have. And I think you need it, especially as Black and brown people, because we're told so much that we can only be in certain areas and we have to fit the stereotype and fit the mold. And like you said, on top of that, if there's no representation to prove those stereotypes different, then we end up, especially as young kids, we end up believing it. We're like, oh, maybe it's not possible because I don't see too many people who come from the place that I come from, who look like me, who talk like me, who dress like me in those fields. So maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe I can't achieve that. And I think if we really want to address that systemic, racism that holds a lot of us back, then we have to get more representation in every field, right? Not just teachers, but in order to address it, we need people in every area. Politicians, we need scientists, we need doctors, we need lawyers. We really need more representation everywhere because every career plays a role in keeping that system the way it is. And in order to dismantle it, we have to open up and broaden our youth's mind so that they can enter in all these fields. And all of that, for me, starts in the classroom. It starts in the school building. And that's why I think the role of educators is so powerful and so important. I want to talk about something I know you're really passionate about. So ethical education is something you mentioned earlier, right? Why do you think that that's something that you value or something that our students need or our schools need?
I credit my teachers early on who gave me an extraordinary foundation, and that's probably why I started with my lower school teachers as my first teachers. We learn how to share. We learn how to collaborate and make connections. Conflict is inevitable. We learn how to resolve conflict. We learn how to recognize and resolve it. We learn that empathy and compassion are really critical elements of humanity. We learn that through stories very, very early on. I remember reading, I have a 16-year-old son, and I remember from when I was pregnant reading. I've always been a reader. I'm an avid reader. And I always remember spending time using stories to talk about values, human values that I think are key and critical to really elevate our shared humanity. And that started very early for me because it was started very early for me through my teachers and reading. When I think about the ethical and moral development of people through history, some of the most extraordinary change makers in the world, I would argue someone along the way really worked on helping them develop their ethical and moral compass. And as someone who was a sociologist and anthropologist, double major in college, what I was always fascinated by and have always been, even before I formally studied those fields, was the study and having a passion for people, for people's behavior. So a little bit of psychology in there too. The study of society, the study of connection, the study of culture and humanity. And, that can, for some people, that is what faith or religion or their spiritual practice provides, a grounding in forgiveness and reconciliation, a grounding in recognizing that mistakes will be very much a part of the experience, and yet they don't have to define you. And that is what I believe today so many of our schools are talking about in terms of restorative justice. How do we repair the harm when an inevitable mistake between and within communities unfolds? I think about the intentional practice of reminding people something that I live carrying and am inspired by each and every day, which is, to whom much is given, much is expected. I have a formal education. My parents did not receive a formal education, and yet they are some of the strongest teachers that I had in my lifetime because of the values that they instilled in me, that I was accepting of and then chose to practice and learn more about in community with others. I think that an intentional study of values, morals, ethics, decision making, understanding our shared humanity, not just as little people who, have to learn how to share. That's a part of it. But as adults, understanding compassion and empathy for everyone. No one has the market cornered on living through COVID-19 and it being the hardest for them. It has been really, really, really difficult for everyone for very different reasons. And if we are so stuck on a hierarchy of pain and oppression across our identifiers, we will miss the window of opportunity to connect and recognize that we do have a fundamental shared humanity, and that based on who we are and how we identify, our creativity and innovation and hopefulness and decision making has been grounded in incredible resilience and an incredible allyship and advocacy and compassion. So I say to you, Jerome, that for me, ethics is about who is the person that I want to be on a daily basis. What is the kind of community that I want to co-create? It is a very active process for me. It is not passively being part of something as much as it is co-creating and contributing to the kind of community, the kind of the kind of life that I want to live, a life of meaning and purpose. And what are those fundamental values that allow me to be the best daughter, the best sister, the best wife, the best mother, the best educator, the best school leader, the best administrator, the best teacher, the best coach, advisor, mentor, that I can be, among other identifiers. I think about that daily.
I love that. That's powerful. Powerful. Off that, I would ask, what advice would you give to say you have a new school leader, right? They're coming into this school and they want to build a school that values ethical education. What is the first step they should take in trying to create that change in this school that they're going into?
So ethical education, sometimes people use the term or the phrase character education. Sometimes people talk about social and emotional learning. Sometimes people talk about this work as educating the whole child. All of that is related. Okay. So it is less about the semantics of what we call it for me, and more about how do we ensure that you as a school leader, if I'm having that conversation
Mm-hmm.
with someone new to this field or to this leadership opportunity, how do you ensure that you consider every aspect of the young people that you're going to be working with? So yes, we want them to learn. So that's an intellectual dimension to who they are. We want them to feel and be part of something. So that's the social side. We want them to exercise their mind, their body. That's the physical side. We want them to expand and learn and innovate and develop creatively. That's the artistic side. We want them to feel a sense of belonging and connection, and to feel intellectually safe to take risks. That's the mental side of a young person's development, and so many other aspects. And so when you think about being a school leader in this new role that you will be in, if I were talking to that person, I would say, if a student doesn't feel that you care, if a student doesn't feel that what they're learning will have relevance to their life, if a student doesn't feel that you want to see them be successful, they are not going to allow creativity to flow. They are not going to take intellectual risks and try to answer a question. They are not going to feel that they can do their very best out on the field, because that something will hold them back. They will not feel a sense of connection to and desire to contribute to their own growth and development at the level that they are capable of. And so that's when you start to see increase in absenteeism. That's when you start to see disengagement. That's when you start to see arguing and disagreements, and students not being able to self-regulate because they haven't been guided or taught through how to. And so, that lack of the ability, that lack of social awareness and regulation of feelings and emotions to be able to de-escalate a challenging moment inevitably could lead to arguments that are persistent. And we know what happens when arguments are persistent.
Yep.
There's a fight coming.
Yep.
And then that leads to holding kids accountable, and the accountability, all of that could be reduced significantly with an understanding that when there are certain stories that we teach, certain history that we center, we need to remember that for some of these some of the young minds that we are trying to inspire and connect, there's more to them that they are carrying on a daily basis that we also have to be aware of.
Yes.
And for the record, that is true for adults too.
Everyone.
We all carry way more than sometimes we can manage. And so we pick and choose what's going to percolate to the top and be the behavior that you all see, or be the actions that we demonstrate, because that's what we have at that moment. And sometimes we're not at our best. And if a student feels at any age that they never had the opportunity to be seen, recognized, and affirmed for being at their best, that's where I think we lose inspiration and hope. And I go back to that. If somebody doesn't think you can do something and they tell you over and over again, you have a choice. Your choice is you can either believe them or you can prove them wrong. And for too many, they believe instead of working really hard with all of the obstacles that are before them. They believe, they sometimes it's heartbreaking. I've done some work with formerly incarcerated individuals, and just even the use of language, formerly incarcerated as opposed to ex-cons or felons.
It's like you're speaking on them in a growth mindset instead of being labeling them with that thing
absolutely.
that they had done when they were younger.
Accountability. You have been held accountable. You have completed the length of time or whatever the expectation was for you to repair the harm. Hopefully you've been involved in some sort of restorative justice work, with some sort of practice that includes a circle or some sort of working with the individual, the community that you have harmed. I think about our Native American brothers and sisters, and they've been doing sentencing circles, since the beginning of time. And there's something to be said for recognizing the individual and valuing and affirming that individual, and also recognizing the impact on a community, and then understanding how, when there is harm, how you're able to create a sense of forgiveness and reconciliation that allows people to be able to restore the sense of connection to one another, and restore a sense of belonging to community, to family. So
I love that so much. Last segment. So this one is called Choose Your Teachers Wisely. So as you know, education happens in schools and also outside of schools, right? So I want you to think about one thing. It could be a person, book, show, movie, teacher, someone or thing that has educated you to become a better person. I want you to give them a shout out and tell us why. Just one.
Just one? Are you really kidding me?
I know. Everyone has a hard time picking one.
You said book.
It could be a book. It could be anything. Book. It could be a movie, TV show, person, teacher, friend, family member. One shout out, someone or something that has educated you to become a better person.
This is really hard because it's between a book that I read very early on in my life that speaks to that spirit of that ethical and moral compass that's very much a part of who I am.
What's the title of that book?
The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein.
It's a classic. It's a classic.
It is a classic. I know it's a classic, and there are some problems with it. I'm not saying that anything is problem free. I think the concept of empathy and compassion and selflessness and advocacy and friendship, I think, are very much a part of that book. And that's a book that has had such a profound impact on me and on my life, and the ways in which I lead, I teach, I parent, I mentor, I sponsor, I would probably say that book. That's not to say that I haven't had individuals that have modeled some of those values in the daily interactions, because they have. And I think one of the things that the book does is it also recognizes just the humanity around disappointment. There are moments where there is disappointment in that book. And as a human being living, I'm almost 50. So I've lived just a little bit in two different countries through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, the teens, and now I'm into this decade. I have so much to learn still. I have so much to offer. I have so much to share and build on with people that are currently a part of my life and people that I've yet to encounter. And I think I'm grateful to all of my teachers and all of the people who have guided me to be where I am today and who support me to be the very best version of myself in the future. So I would say, I would definitely say the book. But that book is only meaningful because of the people that I have had in my life. The people who have really actively taught me in word and in deed with their actions, how to live my best life, a life of meaning and purpose that gives as much as I possibly can to make you feel seen and heard, valued, and appreciated on a daily basis.
I love that. I love that. Liz, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I want to thank you for sharing such great insight. Thank you for your commitment to education for 25 plus years. And I can just hear your passion and your enthusiasm for learning. So I know you still have so much more to give to the field. So I just want to appreciate that and value that, because I feel like, educators, sometimes we don't get our flowers that we deserve. So I definitely want to say thank you for all you do. And thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate you.
Jerome, thank you for the outreach, for connecting with me and inviting me. This conversation has been really invigorating. Certainly not the conversation either of us, I think, thought we were going to have when we connected initially. Yep. And yet I think that's probably my takeaway. These moments of connection provide really beautiful organic moments of trust and of shared love and shared passion for our profession, and really continue to remind us of our shared humanity. So I thank you. I recognize all the people that contributed to who you are, and the gift that you are to this young people and colleagues that you work with. Thank you for coming up with this idea to connect educators. All of you out there, be hopeful. We will, I promise you, we are going to get through this, and we will absolutely learn and continue to exceed the wildest dreams of the ancestors upon whose shoulders we all stand. So just one foot in front of the other gets us to that new place.
I love that.
Better place.
I love that. It's a great way to end. Thank you guys for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything. Bye.
Absolutely. Adios.